Brad Pitt called one day and asked if he could use our technology. True story. So stay tuned. I don't know where it's going to be shown. But I am just absolutely delighted to be able to share my story with you. And we are a needle-free jet injection technology, for those of you who might confuse us with other kinds of needle-free technologies. We're a very fast, safe, rapid method of administration, and sometimes we generate a superior immune response. Is this working properly? Do I have the right one? I think I only have the one that's the beamer, but I don't have the clicker. This one? Right here? Oh, here we go. Green. Okay. So really fast before we get going, most people say, what's this like? How does it work? And it's basically up against the body, click, and then you're done. So a rapid, fast injection. So we are the only commercial needle-free jet injection technology with regulatory clearance for all 3 tissue depths: intramuscular, subcutaneous in one device, and intradermal in the next. We are commercial stage, global, and growing. Our manufacturing is scaled and validated, and we have 36 collaborations across 51 distinct clinical studies. We have claims of efficacy and safety, non-inferiority, and also increasingly superiority for delivery of vaccines. We have a number of global regulatory clearances that include 510Ks and on-label claims, as well as global proclamations around clinical studies that we've done. And we're protected by 4 patent families with 67 different issued and pending patents, as well as trade secrets. So why are we focused on vaccines? Well, it's a huge market growing in perpetuity. Never going to stop. 140 million births last year and about 2.5 total annual immunizations. So about $37 billion in value of spend today and an estimated $100 billion by 2024, according to the WHO. We also have, over the time, determined that, indeed, maybe we can make vaccines work better. Sometimes we can go from 0.5 ml down to 0.1, so dose reduction. And we also have engineered out all of the waste, so we get extra doses out of the vials. And then in terms of the number of vaccines that are under development, more than 100, we are increasingly showing that, indeed, we make them work better, and sometimes needles don't work at all. So how does it work? Again, it's a simple push and click, 2 platforms. The green small one there is intradermal. This is subcutaneous intramuscular. So in less than 1/10 of a second, faster than your nervous system can actually register a response, the injection reaches the target tissue. The power is spring force, a very customized peak of velocity, and then we wind it off to make sure that we reach the target tissue. And our syringes auto-disable after use. So we have both pre-filled and field-filled. So for those of you that are doctors or healthcare people, you know that sharps are an issue. You have to pay to dispose of sharps. It contributes up to 20 bloodborne pathogens, most commonly hepatitis and HIV. We get rid of needles. We have no sharps. We have no costly disposal. We eliminate needle stick testing, treatment, and liability, which is oftentimes amortized in every single injection in this country. And then we inspire compliance, because people who don't like needles might come and choose to be immunized. And then we address reuse in that our syringe disables and you can't reuse it. So in India, as an example, you would go to your own physician because you would be worried that the needle syringe had been cultivated from the garbage dump, washed and repackaged, and you don't know that it's been used. So ubiquitously, we all agree that needles are issues. We've engineered out all of the wastage, so they overfill the vials to accommodate the fact that there's waste here. That means we capture extra doses. So no needle stick, no disposal, no testing, treatment, liability, and extra doses. And we generate a positive ROI for every immunization. Usually it's between 10 and 25%, depending upon the vaccine and the needle group that we compete against. So as an example for intradermal delivery, for those of you that have tried to do that, it's very slow, painful, hard to do, and ours is a rapid push and click. And I'd like to show you really quickly with a video about how it works. We are part of the Polio Eradication Initiative, and I am so proud to explain that this is the very first injection, prime time, of the caregiver with our intradermal device. She's going very slowly, wanting to make sure everything's okay. The gentleman on the other side, injecting into the baby's thigh, had to try 3 times before he could deliver an intradermal injection. Most of the infants actually slept through our injection. Why does it work better? Well, we think it's because we blast more cells. We definitely get more into the skin. So our 510K predicate device, needles and syringes, we proved that we got a bigger blood size and more volume into the skin. So we eliminate needles and the risks. We increase compliance, patient caregiver safety and comfort. Dose efficiency, stretch the dose, get more doses out of the vials, enable immunization, and allow vaccines to reach their target immune responses. So how does the business actually work? We have models around collaborations where we have existing vaccines. These are phase 4. We don't have to prove that the vaccine actually works. But when we prove either non-inferiority or dose reduction through intradermal delivery, we become a named method of administration on the vaccine label. And that will not change. That's a new FDA requirement. But in some cases, certain places in the world don't really care too much about that. So polio, let's talk about polio for a minute. Most people remember the oral drops, and those are still extensively used in the rest of the world. It's a live virus, lives in the gut, can get into the water system and live for a couple of years. So eliminating that live virus is critical, and the globe is moving towards the last step of eradication. It's caused outbreaks, and so consequently 155 countries have voted with the United Nations to adopt the vaccine migration from OPV to IPV, but IPV is 15 times more expensive, and that's created a 50% global shortage of that vaccine. So we are the solution. We've demonstrated, and thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, WHO, and CDC, through a number of clinical studies, that 60% less vaccine injected intradermally with our device is superior to a full dose. That's a global claim that's not on any vaccine label because actually those vaccine companies are not so fond of us that we can reduce the dose by 60% and get more out of their vials. But it's a practical approach for countries that are being adopted. So this example of highlights is all third-party reviewed data and validation from field assessments. A positive 10% in vaccine savings alone, and we're competing against 5-cent needles. We have a superior immune response using 60% less. We're 2 to 3 times faster than needles in processing patients. Out of a 50-dose vial, for instance, we get 63 doses. There's no needle stick testing treatment, which they don't really do too much in the rest of the world. Push and click, anyone can do it, and 50% less weight and waste. So if you keep in mind that we're only saving 10% based on vaccines alone, there's a lot more in that savings chain. We are responsible for the polio eradication stockpile. The first order we're working on right now, we've just scaled and validated our little green injector, the Tropus device, to start production and start deliveries during the first quarter of this year. We've mapped 50 countries out of the 155. 35 have been visited so far, and the 2 that asked for draft purchase orders are already 4 times the capacity that we've just scaled. It's a huge opportunity and need for the next 10 to 20 years. And there are more uses for our intradermal device. Fractional dose rabies, fractional dose yellow fever, which are sometimes in short supply and expensive. In terms of novel vaccines, the business model is such that we start with a number of these candidates. We move them through preclinical phase 1, 2, 3. And as things progress, we proceed towards licensing because we want to be able to demonstrate value. Sometimes we make things work better. Sometimes those vaccine candidates abandon needle delivery altogether. So Zika would be a great example. A horrifying disease. Children who may be born with microencephaly will never recover. And 2 weeks ago, our partner, the NIH, published in Lancet the first preliminary information from phase 1. And if you keep in mind that we're already in phase 2B and phase 3 is in planning for this first part of 2018. We've demonstrated that fractional split dose delivery, so 2 injections in one sitting, is 6-fold higher than 1 injection with a needle. They abandoned the needle group, and we didn't quite know until we saw this data, which is very similar to some of the other data that we're generating in messenger RNA, DNA, and cancer candidate vaccines. Fast tracking by the FDA from start to finish, probably about 3 years to emergency use, and normally it takes about a decade. But again, it's a horrifying disease. So we start out with proof of concept, go through phase 1, 2, 3, and as we come towards commercial activities, we enjoy royalties and transfer pricing from our partners. So for our device platforms, which have a number of regulatory clearances that you can see on the side there, we're focused on really large channels. Polio is a 500 million annual dose need for the next 10 to 20 years. We have a number of novel vaccines that are moving forward in our devices, and then there are alternative uses. In terms of our standard depth and dose, similarly, we have things like on-label claims, and I can highly recommend you go get your flu shot at the pharmacy with our device. We've made it through certain countries which have rigorous regulatory needs, like India, on-label claims for MMR, and those protocols were WHO pre-qualified, which allow us to go down the UNICEF channels. And in some cases, we have outliers like analgesics, where in Russia, needle reuse and drugs out the back door of the hospital is a problem, so if you use our technology, you can't do that. We're in our Series F, so we're a little bit further along than some of these other people. Out of a total authorized capital increase of $5 million, 3.32 has been closed, including preemptive rights among our existing shareholders, leaving 1.7 million. We are pursuing a public offering, so some of the discussion about exit resonates for me. We actually have a very large Asia footprint, so it would initially be in Asia with a dual NASDAQ listing. We are entertaining discussions with a variety of strategic and pharma partners, and there's a discussion about a 10 million capacity increase for intradermal and pre-filled capacity. So roughly 100 million syringes, $100 million. We're kind of the dollar a shot guys, 5 years out. Much of our revenue is already contractual or in agreements in terms of objectives with our existing partners where we go down their channels. So what does it look like in terms of a return? Well, I've raised $54 million to date, all from high net worth individuals and family offices. I am an investor. My background is private equity, and I've invested more than $1 million. I look after people's money so that we all get to the end of the rainbow when we make sure that everybody else is honest on the institutional side. And these multiples that you see here would be examples of very large companies that are not growing at all the way through to pre-filled, needle-free, 1 injection, throw the whole device away. And I'd like to be relatively conservative, but a 6 to 8 times revenue number, looking kind of 2 to 3, 4 years out, would be about a 4 to 9x return for this investment based on precedents. I would be delighted to answer questions. I've brought my devices so we can show you directly how it works, but I'm really, really excited to share my journey and my story, and hopefully you'll enjoy joining our cap structure. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Heather. Any questions from the audience? Real quick questions. We're going to keep things moving here.
So, quick question about your pre-fills. Do you do that, or do your partners fill them and you give them the empty
Yes.
bottle? Okay.
It would be their product, their cold chain, and they come in nested tubs of 100 for their filling lines. Yes.
2 quick questions. Who are your competitors, and would this work for insulin?
Needles are our competitors. We're kind of in a class by ourselves because of our regulatory claims. It would be very hard, probably 4 to 5 years for anyone to catch us, and then they'd have to create a technology. The needle groups, 5 cents for the cheapest of needles, $1.50 on the high end, and we can compete very well in there. And in terms of your second question, pardon me? Insulin. We are focused on fixed dose delivery, and insulin would be age, weight specific. What did you eat? So variable in dose. And we chose not to pursue things like that because, in part, a little bit crowded. Nothing new besides getting rid of the needle. And vaccines seem to be a place where we add so much extra value to making those things work.
Thanks, Heather.
I just hope that none of my Deloitte partners are witnessing me, because I'm about to say I feel like the Price Waterhouse partner coming out with the check. But in any event, all of these companies are Oscars as far as we're concerned, and we're so glad to have had you here. Great presentation.
Thank you.
And good luck with you.
I appreciate that so much. I'm really honored.